America, the USA, is the number one nation on earth commercializing sex with children. Number one. Period. It is a $32 billion industry in the US alone per year. That'll make it one of the top Fortune 500 companies on the stock exchange if it was one. 32 billion. 79,000. This is according to the numbers of the Attorney General of Texas. Our numbers are higher, but let's pick his numbers, Ken Paxton's numbers. 79,000 children sexually exploited in trafficking scenarios in Texas per day.
Well, hey everyone, Alan Parr here, and today I am super excited because I have a friend in the house today, a special guest. You may be familiar with him, but his name is Jaco Booyens, and he is, from my estimation, one of the world's leading abolitionists in the area of fighting against this issue of sex trafficking. So if you are not familiar with what's going on in our world, in our country, in this area, then stay tuned because this is going to be an amazing discussion. How do we actually define sex trafficking? So the people out there who may not be familiar with exactly what it is, how to define it, how to identify it, break it down for us. Exactly what is sex trafficking?
Yeah, really good question. The right question to ask, right? And because there's 25 forms of human trafficking identified, so 25 and counting, and you know, we surely add more, but there's 25 forms. One of the forms that's probably the biggest misconception is human trafficking means human smuggling. That's labor trafficking. And so labor trafficking is one element, and it's a big problem. It's a huge problem. They go hand in hand. I mean, you can't separate these things. You know, when there's human exploitation, sex always finds its way in, right? So it's not always that there's labor trafficking involved, but if there's labor trafficking, there's definitely sexual exploitation involved, right? So you have to consider it that way. So within the 25, one is sex trafficking, which means if it's an adult, 18 and over, or a minor 17 and under, we've got different definitions. So for a minor 17 and under, we say that child is a victim regardless. We do not have to, by the court of law, prove force, fraud, or coercion. We don't have to, right? The child is a victim, right? Now, that's a nuanced statement because you have some governors in our country right now writing law above the law that are trying to change this, right? So they want a child to be able to give consent, and we'll get into that in a minute. But as the law stands today in all 50 states, right, 17 and under is a victim. We don't have to prove force, fraud, coercion. And this is sexual exploitation. This is forced sex against will for either favor or goods or money or safety or love or under duress, threat, or survival. So it's giving sex in return for one of these elements. And it's not always money, right? It could be protection, or it could literally be, like in the case of my sister who was trafficked for 6 years, a case where they threatened the family, will kill your mom if you do not comply, et cetera, right? So 18 and over, you have to prove force, fraud, and coercion. Now that's a touchy subject because 18 and over, it's considered prostitution, but it's not. Only 2% of what people today would consider prostitution is actually prostitution. Because by definition, for it to truly be prostitution, for it to be a prostitute, the woman would have, or man would have to completely out of free will subject themselves to this lifestyle, having never been abused before, never been sexually violated, never been coerced, defrauded, bribed, by a familial person or a foreign entity. So very few women today that are classified as prostitutes are actually prostitutes. Now, what happens in the case where the child is trafficked at 16? So under the law, she's a victim. And now she ages out of the law. Now she's 18. All of a sudden, the law looks at her as a prostitute, but she's not a prostitute. She's a sex traffic victim that just aged out like you can age out of the foster care system. So it's very, very tricky. So it's very important that people understand what sex trafficking is. It's forcing a human being to give sex in return for something. And it's not always money.
So what might this look like in terms of, and we're going to get into your family background in just a moment, guys, because Jaco's got an amazing testimony in terms of how he actually got interested in his field. But before we get into that, how practically does this actually happen to a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old? Under what duress, under what circumstances might somebody consent to doing this I can't imagine somebody
Well,
would
well,
choose
it's never
to do-
consent. There's never consent.
Okay.
There's never consent. No child can consent to sex. There's never consent. And it's a very, very tricky place because right now they want to move it to a consensual act. And we have to absolutely put our foot down. 17 and under cannot consent to sex under any circumstance. Now, you've got some states that have now lowered the age of consent to 16, right? But your statutory rape, statute is 17 and under, and right? So there's many laws. Gavin Newsom is culprit number one, who's writing laws that are absolutely defying and going outside of anti-trafficking laws. There's some states that would like to lower the age of consent to 12. No child, and let's just set the record straight here, no child 17 or under is in a place or a capacity to engage in a sexual relationship in a healthy manner and understand the complications and the connotations that come with sex, the dangers with sex. There's no way. Now, ironically, the average age of child sex trafficking entry in the U.S. is 12. You got to think of a 12-year-old. A 12-year-old is not ready for sex. Not only not ready for sex, but a 12-year-old girl, and it's by design that it's 12, is in a very vulnerable state. 12 to 15, every single woman that's watching this feed went through puberty between 12 and 15. In that timeline, she was highly confused, every single one of them, did not understand her body, things were happening. Her circle who she could talk to about this became almost nothing. Mom and dad probably handed her a book. Her relationship with her father struggled because she can't, this is private. All of a sudden she needs private time. The family goes to dinner. Her and her mom's got to go to the restroom. Her body is changing. She's noticing boys, all of a sudden boys, because her hormones are firing. Her body's getting ready, right, to produce certain hormones. She notices boys her age are basically what the girls would go idiots. So she likes older boys. You ask almost any woman between 12 and 15, they liked older boys. It's not because older boys had stuff. They relate to the older boy because they mature faster. The predator knows this. The predator knows that the girl between 12 and 15 is going through a sexual transition, a sexual phase, a puberty phase, and in that time there's turmoil. Right? Her circle of who she can trust, who she can talk to is small. She's probably going to get alienated from her father a little bit if father is home. If he's not home, this is why the black community in America is such a particular target for sex trafficking because the fathers predominantly are not present, right? Yeah. And so now that girl's very vulnerable, right? So the predator knows this. And so this is the cocktail. And so some of the people who are for the trafficking of children, and you may go, okay, that's a huge allegation. It's not an allegation. I can prove it by statutes and by law they're writing. When they're starting to lower the age of consent to 14 and 12, right? It's because they want children to be able to give consent versus holding the adult accountable to say, why are you interested in sex with a child? This is sick. This is demonic. This is against the word of God 100%. Why would we write a law to make it easier for you to engage with sex with a child? But it is happening. And so it's very important that people understand this. And the other gross misconception, is the movie Taken. That movie shone a light and people go, oh, that's sex trafficking. No. Under 2% of the cases of trafficking in our country are kidnappings. Under 2%. This is not kidnappings, kids in a van, and all of a sudden they're gone. It does happen. Yes, we had one 2 weeks ago. It does happen. Kidnappings do happen, but it's by far the minor offense, or the case count. What's happening today is trafficking is happening by familial trafficking. It's someone the child knows already. It's a trusted figure. It's a father in the home, a neighbor, an uncle, a coach. Here we talk about Simone Biles and what she went through with the U.S. gymnastics team doctor, the U.S. Olympic swim coach. We're looking at, football programs, athletic directors. Look at the Boy Scouts of America, 83,000 lawsuits of Boy Scout leaders, sodomizing and abusing boys and trafficking boys. So we have to understand a predator is going to place himself, normally it's a man, there's some women, but 95% men, are going to place himself or herself in close proximity to minors, close to supply. They're going to earn the trust of the minor and the minor's family. Because when an authority figure, a trusted figure, a familial figure, like a coach, a father, a parent, a principal, a police officer, a pastor, When those guys sexually abuse a child, it's far worse. The impact, the psychological trauma is much worse than if it's a stranger. Because if the person closest to me, who I trust, who I would run to in the element of danger, is the one abusing me, I am now truly alone. That's the immediate mindset of a child. There's nobody. Nobody's going to trust me. They're going to trust this person. I know how they trust this person. I know this person is an esteemed member of society, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the predator uses that over the victim to demean them and say, it's your fault. This is normal. This is love. I love you. Threats. I pay you, et cetera, et cetera. You got to pay off debt, whatever it is, right? So it's a very complex psychological issue with massive trauma that ensues immediately.
Wow. Okay. So I got several questions here, and I want to stay with this before I get into your family background and everything. But just a little bit deeper here. Let's go into this conversation. So let's just say this person who this young girl, most of the time it's a young girl, she trusts, she looks up to, she admires, and he starts making sexual advances towards her. What's the next step? Let's just say that in a moment of weakness, she engages, she's confused, she looks up to this guy, maybe he's twice her age, she's maybe thinks she's attracted to him, and so now she's exploring, 12, 13, 14, wow, this guy finds me attractive, she gives in. What's the next step? Okay, so now they've engaged. I would see that as more, pedophilia or abuse. But how does it move into the world of trafficking, and where does it go from there?
Yeah, let's set a couple things straight. Saying she's giving in, sure, some girls may be attracted, but you can't. Again, this is coercion. These people are very, very, very skilled at manipulating a child's mind, understanding what the child wants to hear. Let me give you an example. Let's call her Susie. Susie is 12. Okay? Now, this should send shivers down your spine because this is the norm today in America. Trafficking is not in the red light district. Yes, the runaways, the foster children, we can talk about the foster care system. It's in a complete shambles. Let's talk about what's really happening. It's in suburbia. It's in the neighborhoods. It's in plain sight. The average man today in America that pays for sex with a child is a father of two. That's the average. That's the norm. These are not the scumbags you think is sitting on his mom's couch at 40 eating Cheetos. These are guys who have power in society. They do it in plain sight. So, this guy's going to take time to look at Susie as a target. A lot of time, sometimes 6 months. He's going to build a case. He's going to find Susie because Susie to him is a soft target. How is she a soft target? Her mom and dad live with her. She lives at home. He looks at her social feed. He sees what she's screaming out and crying out for. Where does she need attention? Are they a financially strong family? Because then you're going to traffic her differently than if it's a financially weak family in a rural part of town. The child in a rural part of town has street smarts. You don't traffic that child the same as the child in Highland Park, Texas, for instance. It's affluent, right? It's emotional trauma. It's emotional need. It's affirmation. It's sense of self. It's identity. So that predator is going to pick one of those tools, and let's say it's identity. Let's say Susie is home, dad's a doctor, mom's, a doctor. They're very affluent, they're very busy. They pacify this child with money. They pacify this child with an iPad, right? During COVID and the lockdown, more time on the iPad. Dad is there, but he's not present. Predator knows this girl needs a dad. She needs to hear words from a father. This predator is not going to make a sexual advance to this girl. He's going to come in as a father figure. He's going to earn her heart. This should scare the dickens out of people. He's going to earn her trust, legitimately, non-sexual, by words of affirmation, by compliment. Hey, I saw you played softball yesterday. I realized you only talked about your mom being there. Your dad wasn't there. Don't worry. I'm watching you. I see you. I know they don't see you. I know the world doesn't quite understand you, but I want you to know I understand you. These are not novices that's doing this. These people understand the mind of a child. They earn her trust, and then they twist her. Then they coerce her, right? Then they it's like going on a date. Alan, your first date. You reached out, you touched the girl's hand, and you read whether she kept her hand still or whether she moved her hand. If she moved her hand, you were like, okay, she's not ready. If she kept her hand still, you took her hand. Then you advance to the next step. That's what a predator does. It's a soft, very soft, calculated entry, and they measure the response of the child. That's everything. And if that child responds with, I'm okay, then they advance. It's a slow process. This is why I'm saying it's not just snatch and grab and kidnap. They earn trust, which then when they earn trust, it feels like love. You go to teenagers today and they'll tell you when you like their Instagram post, it means you love them. That's not love at all. They've made love a feeling. Love is not a feeling. Love is sacrificial. It's unconditional. Love hurts like crazy. But now the predator is saying, oh, it's easy to show you love and you're accepting that I love you. And so there's massive brain chemistry happening at the moment, hormones firing, trust. Now she's protecting this relationship. Now the relationship advances to, has anybody ever told you got the most beautiful eyes or breast, right? And then it comes to, you know what, I so appreciate, you're so unique. You're the only one, And they'll be bold enough to even say their age now. They're not even lying anymore about I'm 14 with someone else's picture. They'll just come out as themselves, right? And then the girl one day is coerced into sending a nude picture of herself to engage to leave the home and meet up in person or have a relationship. Now, if it's a father, it's twisted at different levels. It's like, you know what? I see things in you I don't see in your mom. This is sick. You have to understand, it's indoctrinating a child, a minor, literally playing mind games, making them believe that it's consensual. At least initially, until the first rape. And when the first rape happens, and it's rape, it's child rape, then they'll come with massive domineering, negative reinforcement. And that's when you bring the threats and the danger. This is what we call the battered wife syndrome, where the guy hits the wife and she'll stand in court and defend the guy that hit her. And you'll go, how is that possible? There's a cognitive dissonance happening. There's a disassociation disorder that sets in where she goes, no, he really loves me. This is love. I'm part of this family. I'm contributing to this family. And the world on the outside look and go, no, you're not. This guy is abusing you and using you. Why doesn't she just run? You slow down and understand the trauma that's inside that child. Never mind an adult, right? And now you throw sex in it, shame, hurt, right? Abuse, physical pressure, physical harm. It is a cocktail for disaster.
Wow. Okay, so in order to provide a little bit more context for this, what are some statistics that people may not be aware of, may not be familiar with, to highlight and truly bring awareness to this being a problem? Because I think a lot of people might be listening now and they're probably thinking, oh, wow, okay, well, man, that's sad when it happens to people, but it probably doesn't happen that often. And it's easy to kind of brush it under the rug or sweep it under the rug as if it's an anomaly or it's an outlier. But can you bring a little context to how common is this happening? I mean, what are the statistics looking like in our country, in our world, in terms of this happening? Yeah.
So these are facts. Okay. 26 years ago, my sister was trafficked. Okay. So you go do the math and how long our family has engaged in this conversation. All right. So 53 countries we've supported. So here are the facts. America, the USA, is the number one nation on earth commercializing sex with children. Number one. Period. It is a $32 billion industry in the U.S. alone per year. That'll make it one of the top Fortune 500 companies on the stock exchange if it was one. $32 billion. 79,000. This is according to the numbers the Attorney General of Texas. Our numbers are higher, but let's pick his numbers, Ken Paxton's numbers. 79,000 children sexually exploited in trafficking scenarios in Texas per day. Per day. Now, it's not per day. It's not a new 79,000. There's 79,000 at any given moment in the system being sexually exploited. There's 500,000 plus, 500,000 children being sexually exploited per day in the system in the U.S. per day. Now, here comes the shocking statistic. Only 1% of the crime is reported. So when you see an Amber Alert, and Jessica's missing, that's 1% of the missing children. When you hear about a sex trafficking case in your city, that's 1%. These crimes are not reported. I've never met a single victim in my life who became a survivor who self-identified as a victim. They don't talk. They don't come out. They don't speak. They're under massive duress. Most of them do not live past 7 years. This is a massive problem. There's not a single county in the United States today where sex trafficking is not happening. Not a zip code. None. Highland Park is one of the top 3 most affluent neighborhoods in the world, for that matter. Okay? Constant cases in Highland Park. Any major city. Yes, in the slums. Yes, in the ghetto. Yes, in the red light district. In every single zip code. There's not a single job description that we've not apprehended and arrested. From a state U.S. senator all the way down to the janitor, the school principal, the police chief, the father, the neighbor, the husband. Because it's sex. It's a perversion of sex. Sex is in every single household. There's not a single human being that's watching this feed that is not a sexual being. You can't turn it off. It's either in morality and in God's moral code and value, or it's not. And when you engage in sexual immorality, you are in fact on your path to do 2 things. To feed the system, okay, or to be part of the problem. What's feeding the system? Watching porn. 100% if you watch porn, you are engaging in the system that traffics children and you're feeding the beast. You're creating demand for exploitive and domineering and demeaning and violent content. You're creating a demand for it. Do you know that over 60% of women in porn today are actually placed in that porn flick by their pimp because they're not making enough money on the street that day? Some of them have a quota of $1,000 a day. Some of these children get sexually abused or forced to give sexual favor or sex 5 to 15 times per day. When they don't make a quota, they get pushed into porn. Do you know that over 50% of women in legal brothels in the state of Nevada are asking for court cases to be filed because they're being raped? And you go, well, a prostitute can't be raped. Of course she can. All she needs to say is, I don't want to. This is a massive problem in our country. This is the number. People talk COVID. This is the number 1 problem. And now we're supporting this issue with law to make it legal, with law to teach it, to teach how to give consent. We've got news outlets and articles and curriculums prolonging this, promoting this, wanting children to engage in sex, giving right to the pedophile, taking legislation away from the pedophile. This is just the reality, okay? This is not, fear-mongering, and there's zero hyperbole to what I'm giving you. These are absolute facts. It's in your doorstep. It's in your child's school. It's in your church. It may be in your home. It may be. If you're engaging in porn, you're part of the problem. Get help. There's no such thing as, well, porn hurts nobody. Number 1, it hurts the viewer. It is stripping you from self. It's going to ruin your marriage. It's going to ruin your life, number 1. And number 2, everybody that you're watching on that porn flick are being exploited in some form or fashion, 100%.
Yeah, and I want to get into that. I'm going to get into a couple things. I want to get into some of the laws that are being passed. I want you to break that down. I also want to get into the transition from, okay, this young lady has been exploited. She's been identified as someone that this predator wants to go, to kind of exploit. But then I also want to, so I'm going to come back to that. But before we do that, tell us a little bit about how you got into this. How did you get passionate about this? You alluded earlier to your sister 26 years ago being trafficked. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, your family background, what life was like for you, and then just give us a little bit of background in terms of that, and then how you got so passionate about fighting against this.
Yeah, I'm born and raised in South Africa and raised by a single mom. An amazing woman, a woman of God. I mean, just love the Lord, present. Our family's tight. I've got 2 siblings. I'm the oldest by a lot, over 5 years. And my next 2 siblings are very close, a brother and a sister. And we were a very tight family. That idea that it's a disfranchised family and the parents are not present. No, a dad was not present. And that creates a massive vacuum for a predator to look and say, well, here's huge opportunity. Because there's a father wound regardless. regardless, specifically for daughters, right? There's a father wound. No matter how amazing a mom is, you're not a dad. And no matter how amazing a dad is, you're not a mom. And you can't swap roles, by the way. I mean, and so that's a massive problem. So we're raised by a single mom, amazing school teacher, hard worker, 3 jobs, just we are tight. We didn't miss a single sporting event, none whatsoever. And the story of my sister is really her story to tell. That's something with survivors. You allow the survivor to tell their own story. But I'll in a nutshell tell you, my sister Ilonka was trafficked. And she was trafficked through a corporate setting. This was not a snatch and grab. This was a corporate setting where they earned the family's trust. And it got really complex and complicated for her story. And that lasted 6 years. And she wrote a book about it. The book is titled Keeping Secrets. Her name is Ilonka, Ilonka. It's a fascinating read. It's an amazing story. And it's really her story to tell in detail. But through her eyes, through Ilonka's recovery, through Ilonka's rescue, and then her restoration, which, you know, it takes decades, literally, to rebuild lives that are destroyed, decimated by predators, right? Through my sister's eyes is how we learned about this world of trafficking. Through her account, through her, you know, doing life with her, watching her fight. She's such a warrior. She's an incredible warrior. Today, very healthy. She's a mom of 2 and pregnant with her 3rd and married happily, and she's in the fight herself. You know, she's a worship artist, but that is an anomaly. To get that result from what she went through, it only takes family and support and God, 100%. You cannot rebuild a life like that without God and without the gospel and the freedom and the liberty of Jesus Christ. So it's a very unique story, but it shows that it's possible. And I point to Ilonka, my sister, for every victim we meet and survivor we meet to say, it's possible. It's possible. And at times we work together hand in hand, you know, in this fight. But her story is epic, and we learned what was done to her in detail. Now, you got to remember, when I immigrated here in 2001, that's right after Ilonka was recovered, rescued, and came back, right? There was nobody's talking about child sex trafficking, child sexual exploitation. You would talk about sex abuse. There was a little bit maybe here or there talk about pedophilia, but there was nothing. There was no laws until 2015. The laws in the U.S. were very, very lax, specifically on child sexual exploitation. It was basically prostitution and rape, right? And so fighting this fight after immigrating to the U.S. in 2001 and then fighting it across 53 countries around the world and then focusing since 2012 saying the U.S. is going to be our focus because we recognized at the time that most organizations in the U.S. who do great work are fighting abroad. They're fighting in the Philippines and in Asia and Africa and behaving as if nothing is happening in the U.S., but we're the number 1 nation exploiting children. And so we said from 2012, our focus is the 50 states of the United States. And so we engage in prevention awareness. Then we engage in building the cases, apprehension, rescue, victim services, and then, restitution and reentry, building this life back up. And we partner with over 170 organizations that each specify in one of these elements. And it takes a massive army. It's also a fight you can't fight without law enforcement. It's impossible. If I have intel on a child that's being trafficked today in a neighborhood close to me, or Vegas for that matter, and I go through a door and rescue that child, I'll get arrested because I need a warrant. I need a district attorney. I need a judge to sign the warrant. I need the police to come with us. I need the intel to go to the police so they can be correctly docketed so they can stand up in court. So we can hold the perpetrator accountable in court. So people will say, just go rescue all the children, but defund the police. It doesn't work. You need police, and the police are understaffed, undertrained. Tomorrow, literally tomorrow, I'm flying to train a whole state's sheriff's departments, to train them how to identify victims in broad daylight, at the truck stop, at the baseball game, at the football game, right? And how to apprehend and how to build these cases. Because law enforcement doesn't in boot camp get trained on profiling child sexual exploitation. They get trained on, prostitution, a point of arrest for prostitution. But we've got a long way to go in educating the parent that, hey, it's in your neighborhood and it's very real, and we have to fortify and protect the children before something happens.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. I want to circle back a little bit to this issue of pornography, because I think that is I get so many emails, I get so many messages, comments on my YouTube channel of men that are really struggling with this issue of pornography. And so I'd love for you to kind of break down the entire connection between sex trafficking and pornography. Pull the covers back. Tell us what's really going on behind the scenes. What are the percentages? What we see on the screen, is that really real? How many of those people are actually being sex trafficked? How many of them are actually doing it against their will? What's the real connection between the two?
Okay, so let's start here. Let's give you a case. Let's say it's not a trafficking case. And you asked earlier, how does it go from sexual abuse to trafficking? Well, it's a drug, right? And we're going to talk about that in a second. So the father that's abusing the child one day goes, you know what? We can monetize this. And then sells his own child. And child could live at home. Many times moms know, sometimes they don't know, sometimes they're aware of it, and this is selling the child for sexual favor to the neighbor, to the principal, whatever, convincing the child that this is her college fund. We've seen it all, okay? So let's say just Susie again, let's pick Susie. Susie is abused by her child between 9 and 11. 11, her child moves on to her sister or something else, okay? Now she's sexually compromised. Now Susie gets, accosted at 23 by a strip club. And she's in a little financial trouble. She thinks, well, it's just dancing. What Susie doesn't know is she's been preconditioned to say yes to that person who's approaching her. She was preconditioned because love, value, purpose, sex, intimacy was destroyed at 9. How she sees all those things are completely manipulated. A predator will spot her for the rest of her life unless she's truly healed. So that predator comes and says, hey, that's my girl. Okay, somewhere someone abused her. Thank you very much for grooming and conditioning her. Dad. Now she's been 7 years without being sexually abused. But the cognitive dissonance is there. The disassociation is there. The hurt is there. All I need to do is rip the Band-Aid. I just need to push my finger in the wound because the wound's not healed. The predator comes, push the wound, said, hey, you can dance. She dances. He goes, you know what? You didn't earn what you needed to earn. Now you owe me. You owe me $2,000, so you're going to dance twice a day. And then they just go, you know what, you're just not cutting it. You're going to have sex with this guy, or we're going to kill your mom, kill your father, kill you. Boom, it's done. It's over. That's how it happens. It's that quick. Now, we got to talk about porn. And so porn is a drug. It's the most violent and most dangerous drug on earth. Let's look at drugs overall. You very rarely, hardly ever, the numbers are so minuscule, could you ever see someone start their engagement with drugs with heroin? Right? They didn't just walk up into a meth lab and do meth or cocaine, snort a line of cocaine, right? You need contacts and connections, and you need to progress to that phase. They start with an opioid. They take a pain pill, okay? They take some alcohol. They mix it with something else. They sniff glue. They'll do something, right? Something accessible that's low risk to acquire. They go to a Home Depot, make their own cocktail, right? They start with that type of a drug, right? That drug, let's say it's an opioid, is going to give them about a 3-hour high. Now, if you're really good, you can make that high go up, down, up, down, up, down, and you may have to go 5 days, 6 days in between getting another high. Sometimes 24, 30 days, right? Sex doesn't work that way. A sexual high is not 3 hours. A sexual high is an orgasm. It's 30 seconds, okay? So now you've got a drug that only gives you a high for 30 seconds. So you use the drug more frequently. The more frequently you use any drug, the faster you progress to the next drug. So from an opioid, maybe it's meth. Or maybe it's cannabis and an opioid and then meth and something else. Well, what's the next drug when it's sex? It is different form of porn. It's different form of stimuli. What happens when you watch porn? Dopamine effect kicks in, okay? Your neurons fire. This is the only drug on earth that literally retraces the neuropathway in the brain. It calcifies some, it activates others. So someone who engages in porn, anybody, they start shaping their life around situations to be able to consume the drug. Now, if they're far along down the line, their whole life is about that sexual high. They'll lose relationships. They'll lose meetings. They'll miss practice, right? Do you know the average age of children entering porn in the United States today is 8? That's by design. because porn companies understand you hook him when he's 8, you've got him for life. You'll give him free porn, hook him, he'll be a druggie for life. For life, unless someone steps in and gets him off it. So here's what's happening. You progress from, let's say, soft porn. When I was in high school, porn was a Playboy magazine behind a black cover in a bag at the gas station, and you had to show your ID. You had to be 18. That was porn. Porn today is free on YouTube. And we're not talking about, Pamela Anderson from Baywatch in a triangle bikini. We're talking about gang rape. Boys are starting their porn awareness with hardcore porn. They're not starting with a magazine with a girl that's topless. They're starting with something hardcore free, and it's visual and it's a video. So it's burnt, seared into the mind. So they're not starting with an opioid. They are literally starting with meth, right? Hardcore. And then they use it very frequently. So now they got to go more radical, more dangerous. Do you know that the number one group of men in America today with erectile dysfunction, number one group is men age 18 through 25?
I was shocked when I heard that. Yep.
Why? Why? Because of how frequently they used porn and had to self-stimulate when they were 8, 9, 10, 12, 11. And they completely desensitized the neuron, right? The dopamine. It's like sugar, a sugar addict. You don't eat sugar for a year. You can't eat a whole candy bar. You won't make it through it. You will take a bite and go, that's too sweet. You eat a candy bar a day, you can consume a gallon of ice cream. It doesn't matter, right? Because you need more. It's a drug. So now we're starting our boys at 8 with hardcore porn. So they progress so fast. Now, look at this. The same track that porn is on, child rape is on that same track. That individual has just progressed down the track so far that they can't get satisfied anymore by watching someone else do something self-stimulating, or watching porn, asking their wife to reenact something she could never reenact. They now have to go out and go purchase sex. Now they purchase sex normally from someone they know is definitely older than them because they are afraid. But then that drug hooks them because now they can force someone to do something to them, and they paid for it and they think they're owed it, and now they're abusing a person by default. Who says that girl wants to do this, right? You don't know. What's her true age? Do you know that most people who buy sex say, I don't want to know. I don't care if she's 14, 16. I care about just being stimulated in this moment. And then comes the slippery slope of, okay, now they got to go younger. And the ultimate prize to any pedophile is pre-puberty. It's sex with a child that has not had puberty. And this is the sick, demonic, twisted Sodom and Gomorrah cycle of life that have toppled every single society that have embraced sexual immorality. And our society embraced sexual immorality in 1960 with the love movement. Love is love, okay? Sexual explosion, the explosion of HIV, and here we go. Man-boy love association is very prevalent today. And they go back to the Greeks and the Romans, right, and the Persians that said every man should have boys that he can have sex with. Women are only here to procreate. And this is where we are today. And now we're writing laws to support that kind of a mindset. These are, again, it's not hyperbole. This is fact. Tell me which politician's talking about this today. They're not. They're scared to death to talk about porn. Pastors, scared to talk about porn. And I'm telling you, if you're engaged in porn, you don't digress backwards, okay? You go hardcore. And all of a sudden you wake up one morning and the type of porn you need to consume to get your sexual satisfaction is so far down the road that you're 1 or 2 steps away from paying for sex. That's exactly how it happens.
So you've talked about it from the perspective of the individual consuming it. Now, what about the actual people that are engaging in it? In terms of, would you say that the majority of people or that are engaging in it, porn stars, that they are doing it against their will? Would you say that there's a large percentage of them that enjoy this lifestyle and they see it as a career and it's not a big deal? I've done some videos on this as well, and I know that it's just a huge deception. Some scenes are recorded over 2 or 3 days at a time. We think that this guy is going for like 6 hours straight, but actually it's not. It's all a production. A lot of times they have to inject things into themselves in order to stay erect. Women are forced to do things that they're not comfortable with. So maybe speak just a little bit about from those that are engaged in it, as opposed to maybe those who are just kind of consuming it on the outside.
Okay, let me ask this. When a husband and wife engages in sex, and it's a beautiful thing, it's something God created. Sex is the most powerful weapon to drive out evil of a marriage, but it's also a very evil weapon to bring destruction, right? So I would ask you this question. If a wife has to go to the emergency room, right, frequently, because of what they're doing in the bedroom sexually, you may want to ask questions like, wait a minute, are you okay with this? I mean, broken bones? Bruises. Do you know that every single porn star, they end up in the ER? They end up in the ER. They get suited up. They bleed. There's internal damage. There's reconstruction going on, okay? No human being self-submits to this. Now, here comes the question. Well, don't you think some of them are enjoying the lifestyle? They're sex traffic victims that are enjoying the lifestyle because they've been programmed that this is their worth. This is all they're good for. This is the only way they're going to make a living. This is the place they get affirmation. You can't even find an influencer on Instagram that doesn't struggle with losing themselves a little bit when they get 1,000 likes on a picture. It messes with you. It messes with your mind. What's your worth and your value? And then the next time you post a picture, only 20 people like it, and you go, what's wrong with me? Well, throw sex in there. Throw nudity in there. Put a camera operator in your genitals 6 inches away, right? Shooting the scene 15 times. I'm a film producer, right? Enhancing it with drugs, force, okay? Being tested for STDs every single day before every scene, all right? That is not a normal lifestyle. Now, you may say, well, I've heard some porn stars say that they enjoy the lifestyle. I'm telling you, you give us that girl for an 8-hour interrogation session and a counseling session, and she will crumble in front of your eyes. She's learned how to manage chaos. She's learned how to function in dysfunction. She's learned how to accept this is my worth. This is my only value. Because that's what she's been trained and told and coerced and defrauded into doing. Again, am I saying there's not a single person on this planet that wants to self-exploit sexually? Under 2%. Or you would never see prostitutes saying, help me get out of the brothel, help me get out of porn. Over 60% of porn stars are placed there by their pimps because they're not making enough money. Okay? All your major porn companies, we talk about Pornhub, defund Pornhub, close Pornhub. We can't touch Pornhub. Pornhub is a shell. Pornhub is owned by Manwin in Canada. And Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, defends Manwin. He defends porn. It's a massive revenue generator for Canada. We have no jurisdiction over Manwin. We can't shut them down. It's impossible. These sites called tube sites, fans only, okay, where people are now self-exploiting in their bedroom, where they're being coerced, right, where they're told this is your only way of getting worth. Vanity Fair, Teen Vogue, writing a 12-page article teaching 12-year-old girls how to take nude pictures of themselves and send it over text message and Instagram, telling them that this is where you're going to get value and affirmation. You want to tell me that's not exploitation? You want to tell me that girl that today is being exploited, where 1,000 of her friends see a naked picture because her boyfriend shared it, and all of a sudden she's in a still porn flick? You want to tell me that girl now, when she becomes a stripper at 22, did it all by free will? Absolutely not. You've got to take every single porn star and trace back to the beginning of birth and say, were they ever sexually abused or compromised? Because if the answer is yes, and over 80% of the time it's yes, it's not by free will. It's by preconditioning. It's by a value system that was reinforced into them. This is why it's so dangerous to sexualize children. The porn industry will explode. Marriages will crumble. Do you know that high school students today, this is a national census, okay? A study. High school students today, the hookup culture today, is no longer, college students that says Netflix and chill. The hookup culture today to high schoolers is we have to engage in sex with a partner to know if we're compatible to date. This is not to marry. So kids today believe that if we're not sexually compatible, we're not dating material of one another. Think of how out of a line the progression of intimacy is. to a 12-year-old. Now, if that 12-year-old becomes a porn star, is it in free will? Absolutely not. Society pushed that child into becoming a porn star, right? Parents abdicated positions, school system indoctrinated that child, groomed that child so that a predator can come in and offer something on a silver platter as a solution, right? And then use it. So no, when a wife ends up in the ER because of sex, questions are going to be asked. When she ends up there frequently, or the third, the fourth, the fifth abortion, let's talk forced abortions. Sex traffic victims can't be pregnant because pimps can't sell them while they're pregnant. It's forced abortions. Planned Parenthood, 100% complicit. 100% aware that teenagers walk in that have been sexually abused, exploited, ancestral pregnancies, right? And they perform abortions. This is a daily occurrence in our country.
Wow. Okay, you've really broken down some barriers here. I want to transition a little bit. Talk a little bit about what are some underlying systems going on in our country or in our world that is promoting this, that is allowing this, that may not necessarily be people verbalizing, saying, yes, I'm for sex trafficking, yes, but what are the laws that are being passed? What's the undergirding that is continuing to allow this evil to occur? And then obviously that leads into kind of how your organization is fighting against it. But you mentioned earlier, you keep alluding to certain laws that are being passed. Maybe explain a little bit about kind of what's going on behind the scenes that's making this possible.
Yeah, let's start in ground zero. Let's paint ground zero. Any sexual conversation with a child, any, okay, whether there's same-sex, heterosexual, bisexual, gender identity, any drag queen story hour. So now connect the dots with what I'm saying to you. Now connect them for you, okay, because I call it out. Any sexual conversation with a child, 17 and under, predisposes that child for manipulation, okay, fraud, force, coercion of any sort, and for a predator to step in and abuse that child. Because you are bringing a concept of sex that married couples struggle with, okay? And you predisposing a mind that is not formed, that cannot measure consequence, okay? Chemically, right? Cognitively, cannot measure consequence, right? Cannot understand ramification, cannot understand the implication of sex. And even if it was a heterosexual conversation, right? If you prematurely have this conversation with the child, you are in fact grooming the child, breaking down barriers for a predator to swoop in. Now, what if you're doing it with social awareness and social acceptance, like Drag Queen Story Hour? What if you are engaging young boys at the age of 7 to experiment with their gender? I don't care if it's a gender conversation or a porn conversation. You are normalizing sex talk in the mind of the child. Now, what happens? Well, we're talking to them at the school. Okay, so you think that child's going to be able to completely disconnect when a predator now online engages in sex talk with him or her? No, you've normalized adults talking to them about sex. So they will now not call mom and dad and say, hey, there's some creep on my Instagram feed, on my Facebook, on my Twitter. There's some creep talking to me about my body parts. We do this all the time. We're having these conversations with adults at Barnes & Noble. In Drag Queen Story Hour, we're having these conversations in the classroom. It's normal. It's not normal. It shouldn't be normal. This is how they contribute. It's very subtle. It's very cunning. Gentle as a dove, wise as a serpent. So don't think for 1 second it's just about wanting every boy to come out and say, my name is, Luna. It's not about that. It's about predisposing a child to think sex, to look at sexual conversation and action with an adult as normal behavior, to exploit the child, to normalize it. And so how is it happening today? It's the gender identity conversation. It's the Drag Queen Story Hour. It's Gavin Newsom. Yes, governor of California, culprit number one, who was the first governor to sign into executive order without the California State School Board getting a vote, by the way, signed into executive order the comprehensive sex ed curriculum, mandatory to all public schools in California, age 10 and up, teaching it's perfectly normal, which is an illusion. It's a lie. It's not perfectly normal to talk to a 10-year-old about sex in the classroom. It's not a teacher's job. That's the parent's job. Okay? But he signed it into executive order. The same book that's illustrated, that's porn in the classroom with Susie bent over, displaying it all, giving sexual slang to her body parts, giving them the genderbread man to pin sexual genitalia onto it to talk about sex at 10. At 10 in the classroom. So now Johnny goes home and some predator approaches him on, I don't know, Xbox in a live game session and talks about sex. Johnny's engaging in this conversation because his teacher, a trusted figure, I told you before, is talking to him about sex in the classroom. We're not talking about sex at the dangers of falling pregnant, the dangers of STDs. No, we're talking about promoting and normalizing, engaging in sex, experimenting with sex. Well, then Newsom went a step further. Now, that's in 27 states in the United States. Even Texas, ISD in Austin is teaching comprehensive sex ed, although the state school board voted it down. But independent school district superintendents can opt in. This is the number one battle we're fighting at school board. We talk about CRT, critical race theory, toxic. Talk about CSE, comprehensive sex ed. It is destroying your child because once that teacher one time talked about anal sex to a 10-year-old in a classroom, it's done. You're over. We have a case of a 12-year-old boy who went home and went into YouTube and typed in anal sex. He'd never heard of the concept before in his life. He heard it from his teacher in the classroom. He goes home, he types into YouTube, anal sex. You go do it. You see what pops up. Graphic, free anal sex porn. This kid gets hooked in a second, watches 2 hours of porn a week now because of what a teacher did in the classroom, because a governor signed an executive order to teach that. Well, then they went younger. Now comprehensive sex ed is taught to kindergarten, age 5. Different curriculum, but they're teaching masturbation to 5-year-olds. Why in the world does a 5-year-old need to know about masturbation? Do you understand? These are laws. This is State Bill 145, Assembly Bill 2218 in California. We're talking about Gavin Newsom signing an executive order for 3-year-olds in California to get puberty blockers, for the parent to lose sexual agency. We got a case now with Jeff and James in Texas, and James's mom calls him Luna, and the dad loses all custody. Puberty blockers. This is signed into executive order by Gavin Newsom and Governor Inslee. Chicago, Illinois at the moment, handing out condoms to 8th graders at school. Why? Because they want the kids to engage in sex. Now you get Man-Boy Love Association that's coming in, get funded. You get, the LBGT community. Not Q, T. That Q is toxic, okay? You ask people like Rob Smith, okay? Married to a man. He said, Yaku, we're no part of this. The LBGT community do not support the exploitation of children. We do not support comprehensive sex ed. We do not think you should teach a 5-year-old masturbation. But they're being hijacked. The LGBTQ community is being hijacked by politicians because they bring these bills to state and Senate floors and they put them in under Gender Equity Fund, transgender health care bill, and then comprehensive sex ed is part of it. All right? And the politicians are scared to death to vote against anything LGBTQ. But the real LGBT community say, no, this is not us. We're not about exploiting children. No way, right? It is such a bait and switch game that's going on at the moment. And so, yes, they're lowering age of consent. They're bringing comprehensive sex ed into the classroom, age 10, age 5, books like It's Perfectly Normal, what's happening to my body, what's happening to my body for boys, for girls, sex, puberty, and stuff. These are books, actual books, curriculums, right? Kids are reading across this nation. Now people go, well, thank God it's not in Texas. Well, the California kid is moving to Texas, becomes your son's friend. He's 10, he's on and he starts talking about sex to his buddy. Why wouldn't he? Because he's being talked to about sex in the classroom. This is a disaster, an absolute disaster. We're now doing the work of the pimp in the classroom. We're grooming kids for predators in the classroom. We're removing the pimp, and now the predator can go online and engage directly with the John, the buyer, can engage directly with the child, right? And so it's time for us to criminalize the purchase of sex in this country. Criminalize it. Until you go after demand and you criminalize the purchase of sex, you will not stop this. We can rescue 1 million kids, right? Because someone's willing to pay for sex with a child, someone will provide it. So we have to protect the children. We have to understand that the prostitute in your mind, probably not a prostitute, was probably exploited. Okay, we need to cover those women and help them get out of that lifestyle, and then prosecute and criminalize the purchase of sex.
So as we kind of wind down here, I'd love to transition to, we've talked about the problem, we've identified it significantly, and you've done a phenomenal job just letting us know that this is way more of an issue than the majority of people probably would give credence to, and it's essentially like a silent killer. It's happening behind the scenes without people even knowing about it. So oftentimes in these situations, I would imagine that nobody would be able to listen to this discussion that we're having and say, oh, okay, well, wow, that's just too bad. I mean, most people, hopefully, if they have a heart, would want to say, how can we get involved? How can we be part of the solution rather than continuing to be part of the problem or just ignoring that there is a problem? So I want to pose this question in two ways. How can we be part of the solution? How can we partner? How can we get involved? But then a second question would be, how can parents, if it's even possible at all, protect their children or guard against this, or pay attention to certain signs that, you know, that their children might be exposed to certain things? Now, I know that's two totally different questions, but I didn't want to forget.
No, it's good. Of course it's possible. Yeah. Of course, you got the Word of God. You've got the Bible. Teach your children about purity. Teach them about sexual morality. Live a sexually moral lifestyle in your house. Honor your wife. Honor your husband. Fathers, father again. Being a dad takes 30 seconds. One ejaculation, now you're a dad. Being a father is hard work. Get engaged. Know your children's friends. Know their friends' parents. Talk to all your buddies on your street. Hey, your friends, go play golf. Hey, weird question. Do you watch porn? Yeah, sure. Okay, I want to help you to stop. Why? Our children are being exploited. Can I help you with a resource? Not to shame the guy, but to step in and walk. Hold one another accountable. Get the pastors to talk about this. Get men's ministry to engage in this. How do we parent a girl that's going through puberty? How do we have a healthy sexual conversation with our daughters that's in puberty and not leave it up to the pimp online? How do we engage in this conversation on my street? Take your city back. Take your street back. How do we take our school boards back? Show up. The Christians need to show up. When there's a school board seat open for election, let 100 vetted, verified individuals from the faith community show up and compete for that seat and take it back. Hold them accountable. Say no to comprehensive sex ed. Draw a line. It's not okay. It's not their job. Go ask the question of your principal. Are you teaching sex ed in my school? If the answer is yes, stop it. Fight it. It's not their job. Engage in the conversation on a local level. I'm so tired of conservative Christians in this country wanting to fight the heel, Washington, D.C. and the White House. We have put our eye on the wrong price. Sure. Do we want a godly man in the White House? Absolutely. But that's not what affects your children and your marriage tomorrow. It's the county commissioner that's shutting your city down, that's forcing mask mandates. It's the school superintendent in your ISD that's bringing in comprehensive sex ed into your classroom. You got to start making this a local personal fight. And if your family, my family was affected. If your family is not affected yet, praise God. Now go fight so that no family is affected in your neighborhood. Have this conversation. Push them to our resources. ShareTogetherNow.org. Join our team. Raise your hand as a family saying, Yaku, come hold a town hall discussion in our town. We will come. We will rally around you and your church and come bring awareness and share tools with the community. Reach out to us. Follow me on Instagram. It's 100% to combat sex trafficking. Do something to be proactive in the fight in the local community versus just spewing venom online. Somebody better fight Hollywood. Somebody better fight the pedophiles in Washington, D.C. Let's focus in your local community. You can do that.
Thank you so much. That's been absolutely amazing. As we kind of wrap this up, tell us about your organization, what you all do. I believe you have a documentary coming out, Sex Nation. I don't know if it's out or not, but tell us a little bit about that, and how people can get in touch with you. You mentioned on Instagram or whatnot, but how can people best support you? What is it that you all are really fighting right now? What success have you all seen in this fight? Maybe we end on some good news. What are some positive things?
Well,
I saw on Instagram you had
a
bill that you signed or something signed. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, good news. We just, I was approached by Oklahoma, State and Governor Stitt. Amazing. Representative Russ came to me and said, Yaku, can you write a bill? And we do it. And I told you before, we do everything from prevention to awareness, rescue, restitution, reentry, and we partner with organizations. So we're in the whole fight. So I wrote a bill for the state of Oklahoma, which I would like to see in all 50 states, for college students in their orientation week, college and high school students to be trained on the dangers online and how pedophiles operate and how they traffic, right? And so this is now state law in Oklahoma. So every college campus, we can go in and teach every single student, and in high school, etc. That bill was signed last week. It took a long time to get it signed, and I believe we can get it signed. But those kind of bills, we write bills. We go in awareness. We have this town hall gathering where we go around the country, and we're seeing massive, massive momentum of parents blocking comprehensive sex ed in their school system, like in Frisco, Texas. There's arrests and rescues every single day that we're aware of, either us directly in the rescue efforts. We've got constant cases, or our partner organizations who we help them in some form or fashion have rescues. We're seeing huge growth in the safe house industry of having victim services and building these things. We're personally working on 2 safe houses ourselves in the state of Texas to get these up and running, because there's not enough resources for women to go and girls to go once they're rescued, because you can't just take that child back and say, okay, go play softball and go back to school. There's massive, trauma-informed therapy that has to happen by clinical, trained individuals. And so there's huge victory. We saw massive victory under President Trump. We saw that clock rolled back under the current administration. There's not much happening, if anything, by this administration. That's not a political statement. I'm just giving you fact. Okay, this administration is not focused on child sexual exploitation at all. Okay, if anything, they are prolonging and allowing the laws to exploit children, and they're not frowning upon it. But there's massive victories going on. We also saw, bills signed in states like Florida to protect children. A new bill that's on the docket right now in Texas to go into 6th grade and teach 6th graders. I've personally taught 4,000 high school students last year, personally, 7,000 parents, 3,000 faculty, teachers on trafficking and how to identify it in the classroom. Truckers Against Trafficking is doing amazing work at truck stops. So there's huge progress. There's reason to celebrate, but we can't rest on laurels. We got to drop the hammer and go full steam. So sharetogethernow.org is our nonprofit 501c3. We need your support. We need the volunteers. We need people to take ownership of their community. Yeah. I want to ask every single person that's listening, go watch the movie 8 Days, the number 8, DAYS. It's a feature film, not a documentary, that we produced. It's in 200 countries. It's been seen by literally hundreds of millions of people. It's become one of the choice training tools for law enforcement. Watch that movie and watch it with your 13-year-old and up. Let them watch it with you and understand how this happens, how it works, okay? And then, yes, we have a documentary coming out called Sex Nation, which is a very different angle. It's a clinical and scientific angle behind, sexual exploitation and trafficking, and we'll keep you posted on when that's coming out. And in my social media, we also recently launched a new social media platform called Free Space. It's the only social media platform. It's autonomous. You can't get deplatformed. You should be on it, Alan. You can't get demonetized. It's its own server stack, own cloud base. Can't be turned off like Parr, but it's the only social media platform, Free Space Social, where in the terms of service, I wrote it myself. We say 0 tolerance to porn, 0 tolerance to child sexual exploitation. We're direct linked with the FBI and law enforcement. If we see a single, porn post or predator post, it goes immediately, and we see apprehension. So there's huge victory there as well. That's a platform that's really a conservative Christian platform to honor faith and family. And so I know that's a mouthful. It's a lot we're doing, but that's every day for us. That's what we're busy with.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Yaku, I cannot tell you just how thankful I am. I know you are a very, very busy man. And let me just first say that I appreciate your presence. I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate your efforts. And I'm just so thankful for you to give us a little bit of your time today. And if you could just, do us a favor and just send us all of the links of everything that you would love for our viewers to check out, how we can support you, follow you, the links to the documentaries and things like that. Guys, they're going to be in the description below this video. And so please support, please do your part, and please continue to pray and fight against this evil, this cancerous evil that is coming after our children. It's coming after our children. It's not enough, everyone, for you to say, well, I'm not affected. But your beautiful children, that beautiful little girl that you held in your arms whenever she was born, or that wonderful little boy that you take to your soccer games and his soccer games, and you coach and you love deeply, like, they may seem innocent now, but they're viewing things. They're being exposed to all sorts of things. And it's up to us, as Yaku said, as parents, as godly parents, as Christian parents, to really take a stand and educate our children, and not leave that up to someone else to do, because they're going to educate them in the ways of the world. But we have to take that upon ourselves to be intentional with our children, and also do our part in the community, as Yaku said, to fight against this as much as possible. So, Yaku, any final words? Anything that you'd like to add here before we close for our viewers?
Yeah, I know. Look, we just, by the words of Jesus, bring me the children out of the mouth of babes. May we love him and submit to him like a child, faith like a child. And then just a warning, rather you put a millstone around your neck and throw yourself, or be thrown into the ocean. And that's about a 50-pound center block and a chain. Right, so see that graphic image. This is Jesus talking, not me. This is him saying, rather you do that than harm a single child. And so at some point here, we got to take ownership of the children who are not ours. And that's why we call Share Together, our nonprofit. We share the responsibility of discipling the nations and sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. And we share the responsibility of fighting for the widow, the orphan, the lost, the destitute, the voiceless. So, Alan, you're doing that. Thank you. God bless you. God bless all your viewers. We'll send you all the links. And yes, please, we need the support. And we're very thankful for you and your ministry as well. Thank you.
Well, you'll have my support at least. You'll have a supportive one after hearing all of this. And I trust that it's going to reach hundreds, hopefully thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people as they watch this video. And guys, do me a favor. If you've been blessed by this discussion and you want to increase the awareness, the least you could do, I ask, is just share the link of this video, as well as any other videos that you may see from Yaku's organization. Just share. I mean, that's the minimum that we ask you to do, is just copy the link, share it with your neighbors, share it with your church, share it with your pastor, and say, hey, are you aware of what's going on? Are you, or is your mind kind of closed off to this? Do your part, share, get involved. And Yaku, thanks so much for your time. God bless you. We're going to be praying for you, and not just praying, but supporting you as well. Thank you for your time. God bless everyone, and hope you all enjoyed this discussion.
Thanks, Adam.